I have some serious information regarding the serial killer who is on the loose in California right now. Basically, if you haven't seen my prior videos, there's a serial killer who is on the loose right now in California who has already claimed 6 victims, and authorities are worried that he's looking for his next target. Police have stated that they still do not know the identity of the killer, but they have stated that they have raised the reward for any valuable information regarding his identity or his whereabouts to $115,000 at the time of this recording. We also have some information regarding the names of a couple of the victims that he's taken so far. So far, we have Alexander Yaw, Salvador Devuti Jr., Jonathan Hernandez Rodriguez, and Juan Cruz. Most of the killings have taken place in the early hours of the morning while it's still dark out. We're talking from 12 a.m. to 4, 5, 6 a.m. So once again, I tell you this. If you live in Stockton, California or Central California, please try to limit how much you go out at nighttime. And I'll keep you updated with any more information I find regarding this current true crime case that's going on. But other than that,
this man fed his victims to his pigs. Robert Pickton picked up drug addicts and sex workers in Vancouver's red light district. He would take them to his farm where he would murder them in horrific ways, even injecting them with antifreeze. In '97, one of his victims managed to stab him and escape, and when she told police, they didn't believe her because she was unreliable. He wouldn't be caught for another 5 years when his pig farm was raided for illegal weapons. During this, they found items and DNA from missing women. He was convicted of killing 6 women, but he confessed to 49. And he was quoted as saying he was very upset he couldn't make it to 50. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years.
This past Wednesday, this Utah man fatally shot his family of 7 and then turned the gun on himself. Michael Haight, his wife, his 5 children, and his mother-in-law were all living in their home in a small town in Utah that was about 180 miles from Las Vegas. Tasha filed a divorce petition in late December, and then her mother moved into the home with them to provide support. The children were identified by their ages and genders: 17-year-old female, 12-year-old female, 7-year-old female, 7-year-old male, and 4-year-old male. What's weird about this is that Tuesday night, Tasha and her daughter went to an event that was going on at their church, and then the next morning she had a scheduled appointment to meet with some unidentified person. We don't know what the appointment was for. We don't know who this person was. However, when Tasha did not show up to this appointment, that person immediately called in for a welfare check, which is strange to me. That tells me that this person knew something and was extremely scared for her after she just did not show up that morning. A missing person report was filed with Cedar City, and then when they learned that they lived in a different town, they went ahead and just moved it over to the local police department, which then turned into a search for the entire family. The police department went up to their home and decided to go in, and that's whenever they walked in on a very gruesome scene. Online, they're saying that the family is a very religious Mormon family, and unfortunately, I think this was a situation of, if you're leaving me, I'm gonna kill you all so we can all be together in heaven. It's truly horrifying. No one in this family had criminal backgrounds. However, the police did have interactions with them in the past. They would not say what for, but there was some sort of investigation going on a few years ago. I'm going to assume that it was probably something that had to do with domestic violence.
Now this was personal. In May of 2007, Boquito the gorilla broke her arm and wrist, sat on her, and bit her over 100 times.
After murdering his grandparents, Kemper bludgeoned his mother to death with a claw hammer while she slept. He then decapitated her and sexually assaulted her severed head before placing it on a shelf and using it as a dartboard. Here's Kemper in a video interview.
I cut off her head, and I humiliated her corpse. It's there, you know? A 6 young woman dead because of the way she raises her son and the way her son is raised, the way he grows up. And what's her closing words? I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk. God, I wish I had.
Ed Kemper is truly one of history's most terrifying serial killers.
So a lot of people know the movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Most people know him as like he's this slasher with a chainsaw. He like wears people's faces and, you know, he's just like his family is helping him like commit all these murders and they're trying to keep it hush because he's crazy and it's like, oh, he's just our sweet little boy. He's just not all the way there. And that's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's what most people know him as, right? But what most people don't know is that it is actually based off of a real story. So there's this guy named Ed Gein, right? Ed Gein was born in Wisconsin. And he grew up and he was super isolated, like always by himself. People described him as like a weird dude. Like he was very, always like by himself, like never really in a crowd or had any friends. He was always like a recluse. Ed Gein started grave robbing and like digging up dead bodies, and he would use their skin for like stuff around the house. He'd use their bones as like utensils, and he has been confirmed to have killed at least 2 people, but they think it's upwards of 10. But yeah, so he was arrested, and the scariest part about it though is that he
The sweet smell of justice. Hi, my name is Ethan and here's everything you need to know in under 1 minute. On July of 2022, 14-year-old Gavin Nup was riding in the car with his sister Summer. He had spotted a taxidermy buck's head on the side of the road and wanted to take a video of it. His sister pulled safely to the side of the road to let Gavin do so, and while he was recording, a black Mercedes struck him and drove off. Police were able to trace the car to 22-year-old Tyler Mayu. Because of Gavin getting unalive due to foul play, the town demanded justice. The good news is they have now filed 17 charges against Tyler, and as it looks of it, justice is getting served.
The urban legend goes that this college-age girl lived in a dorm with her best friend. So there was this big party going on. She invited her roommate, like, hey, there's this huge party going on. Her roommate was like, I'm not going. Like, I got too much I gotta do. I need to study. I got a test tomorrow. Like, it's just not gonna happen. So she kept trying to convince her, and then eventually she was just like, okay, I'm gonna go to the party. I'll come back. I'll see you. We'll kick it, whatever, right? Yeah. And she goes out, has the time of her life, whatever, comes back home. It's really late, and all of the lights are off at the apartment. But when she gets there, the door is unlocked. She always locks them. Maybe she just forgot. She walks in, all the lights are off. She almost went to her room, but then she was like, nah, it's late. I'm gonna just let her sleep. So she goes to bed, right? She wakes up the next morning. She didn't hear her roommate, and she was like, like, that's weird. She said she had a test and she needed to study. So she goes out, all of the lights are still off. Like, everything looks exactly how it did last night, right? Okay, now she's starting to get creeped out, right? Yeah. So then she goes into her roommate's room. She doesn't see her, and she sees blood everywhere. And written on...
I killed my mom in her sleep with a sledgehammer.
Is there a reason why you did that?
Yes, sir.
Well, can you tell me why?
No, sir.
You can't tell me why?
No, sir.
Is it a reason you don't know why you did it, or you just don't want to tell?
I didn't know why I did it.
Okay.
I killed her at around 11 p.m., I think. And I think she went to sleep at around 9 o'clock.
Okay. When you killed her, what about your brother lives there with you too, right? That's the only person who lives with you?
Yes, sir.
Did you do anything to him?
No, sir. I was kind of expecting the fire to kill him.
Oh, you were?
Extremely creepy facts. That will blow your mind. When you die, your hearing is the last sense to leave. You can hear your loved ones leave you behind. A human head remains conscious for 20 seconds after it's been decapitated. If you look up the number 241,542,903 on the web, you'll find people with the heads in fridges.
Imagine a stranger living in your house for months and you had no idea. On September 20th, 2019, James and Brittany Campbell returned to their home in Honolulu after a week on vacation. When James went to open his house door, he noticed a man inside pulling it closed. This man was 23-year-old Ezekiel Zayas, and as he peeked through the window, he told James, "This is not your house." James grabbed a weapon for protection and managed to get the man out of his house while Brittany called 911. When the intruder was in the front yard, James noticed that he was wearing his clothes. Police eventually arrived and arrested Ezekiel, but the story doesn't end there. When James and Brittany entered their house, they noticed that the intruder had gone through everything and their whole house was trashed. Ezekiel used James' laptop to record disturbing diary entries about the family. The couple also found a typed manifesto about gruesome plans that Ezekiel had for the family. This included surgeries such as sexual reconstruction and a hand transplant. The journal even mentioned very personal details about the couple, such as that Brittany was undergoing fertility treatments, and this is something that they had not shared with anyone. James and Brittany began putting the pieces together and said that months leading up to their trip, strange things kept happening in their house. This included their computer webcam being turned on in the middle of the night, their doors being unlocked, their dogs barking, and things going.
I am the youngest murderer in history. My name is Carl, and I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, USA. In 1929, I was 8 years old and I was friends with a little girl named Cecile Van Hoos. We often spent our days looking for scrap metal to sell to earn a little money. One day, while we were arguing over a piece of scrap metal, Cecile chopped it out of my hands and hit me in the face with it. I was angry and in pain. I went home, but I was boiling with rage. I climbed up on a chair, grabbed my dad's shotgun and ran back to Cecile's house with the gun. When I got there, I said, "Now I'm going to kill you," and shot her. All for a piece of scrap metal. Just a piece of scrap metal. In court, I explained why I did it, but I couldn't believe that I really killed my friend. After I testified, I slept through most of the rest of the trial. Eventually, I was sentenced to 15 years in prison. My parents managed to post bail of only $500, so I was able to get out of jail before my sentence was up.
It was a night out for three young girls: Sophie Russon, age 20, Eve Smith, age 21, and Darcy Ross, age 21. Now, we know that they started their night on Friday night at the Muffler Social Club before travelling to Porthcawl, and then they headed off in a VW Tiguan with two men to Cardiff, which is where they were last seen. Now, those two men were Raphael Gian, 24, and Shane Loughlin, 32. Now, after their families didn't hear from them at all over the weekend, it set about frantic worry, of course. All five were reported missing. Eve's sister was putting frantic updates out on Facebook throughout the weekend, asking for anyone for any help to help find her sister. And Sophie's mom even did an interview with one of the papers, saying that she felt like she was having to take matters into her own hands and go out looking for them. Now, in the early hours of this morning, just after midnight, police located that car, and in their latest statement they say along the lines, following inquiries to locate the five missing people, we found a car located in the St Mellons area of Cardiff. They believe it came off on the A48. 3 people were deceased. 2 people are now in hospital. Now, we're not sure which of those have survived and are recovering in hospital, but as you say, just a terribly, terribly sad ending to an absolutely awful, worrying weekend.
I was busy thinking about
South Korean citizens have been in a stir this past week due to this man who had a crazy airplane freakout over a baby. This week, there was a full flight from Seoul to Jeju Island. For those of you who don't know, Jeju Island is an amazing vacation island in South Korea that many people go to vacation for. On the flight, there was a baby who was about a year old with their mom and dad. Reports state that it hadn't been that long on the flight and the seatbelt sign was still on when this man behind me in the black shirt suddenly got up and started yelling profane things at the mom and dad. I saw the clip and he was going crazy and screaming at the top of his lungs while the flight attendants were trying to tell him to calm down. He said things like, "If you can't handle it, don't have a baby. I didn't have a baby because I didn't want to live like you." He was supposedly so angry because the baby was crying and making noise. Paraphrased, he would say things like, "If you can't handle it, don't have a baby. I didn't have a baby because I didn't want to live like you. So it sucks if I curse at your baby, but it's okay if I get damaged by the baby." Listen guys, this guy was screaming at the top of his lungs. Then they say that it seemed like he was about to sit down, and he did for about 2 minutes, and then he got up again and started going crazy again. Meanwhile, all this time, I could hear the mom saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." The flight attendants even told the man that if he kept it up, they would have to call the police. Eventually, the only way that they could calm the incident down was by having the family with the baby move back. So yeah, guys, a lot of South Korean citizens are absolutely angry at the man's actions. I know a lot of people get annoyed by babies in public spaces, but like the reports say, it hadn't even been that long. Yeah, I think this guy's gonna have a hard time escaping the ire of the public for this one.
A woman who wrote a book on dealing with grief is now charged with murdering her husband. Everyone felt bad for Corey Richens when the father of her children and love of her life passed away on March 4th, 2022. She then went on to write a children's book called Are You With Me that was dedicated to her husband. Her husband, Eric Richens, had been found unresponsive in their bedroom after she went to soothe their child who had a nightmare. Eric had also told a friend after Valentine's Day that he believed his wife was trying to poison him. And the autopsy showed his body contained 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl. And his wife, Corey, had asked her friends if they knew where she could get substances. And when she purchased the fentanyl, she said, "I need something strong," quote, "like the Michael Jackson stuff." When questioned, she told the police that she left her cell phone in the bedroom while she went to comfort their child, but instead, records showed that she'd been using it on and off while her husband lay dying. They'd been secretly investigating her while she went on to try to make money. 1 month prior to her arrest, she went on a local news station to promote her book, and here's a clip.
Start with your story. What happened in your personal life?
So my husband passed away unexpectedly last year. So it's March 4th was a 1-year anniversary for us, and he was 39. It completely took us all by shock. And we have 3 little boys, 10, 9, and 6. And you know, my kids and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we've experienced last year, and you know, hoping that it can kind of help other kids, you know, deal with this and kind of, you know, find happiness some way or another.
So you actually wrote this book with your children.
I did.
And it's only been a year. How did you process and say you go from processing death to I need to write a book and help others?
You know, I just watched the struggle that my kids were going through, and I actually, you know, I went on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and trying to find something that we could use to cope at nights. Nights are the hardest, it seems like, for everybody when, you know, dealing with anything.
Part 2 of the John List story. On November 9th, 1971, John List systematically executes his entire family in his New Jersey mansion. Once he's already gathered the bodies of his family and puts them in the ballroom on top of sleeping bags, he cuts his face out of every single photo. He writes his 5-page confession to his pastor, explaining why he's done this. He then turns on all the lights, turns on religious music, and then leaves the house forever. When police find the bodies a month later, it's clear that they're looking for John List because he leaves a 5-page confession. But at this point, he has had a month head start. And mind you, before leaving, John destroyed every single photo of himself, making it very difficult for police to put together a wanted poster, and that they couldn't put his face on TV. Hence why he was not found for 18 years. But what we know now, once John left home, he parked his car at JFK Airport, which is in New York. He never takes a flight, but he wants to make it look like that so he confuses police. Once he leaves his car at the airport, he takes a train from New Jersey to Michigan. He then goes to Colorado, settling in Denver in 1972, where he creates a new identity and goes by Robert Peter Clark, stealing the name of an old college classmate. He gets a job as an accountant, and then he joins a Lutheran congregation. Through a church event, he meets Dolores Miller, and he marries her in 1985. Together, they move to Virginia. He has an entire new life, and he seems like a stand-up guy. But then it hits the fan when his face appears on America's Most Wanted in 1989. In the episode, they share the horrific things that he had done, all in his previous life. And this is thanks to forensic artist Frank Bender. Frank created a physical bust of List, Now, Frank had very few images to work with, but he also had the challenge of imagining what List would look like after all these years and he's aged. So based off information of John List's lifestyle, he had to make a lot of guesses, which were extremely accurate. When you compare the bust to John List's mugshot, you have to admit, very impressive. So when America's Most Wanted shares this, it goes out to an estimated 22 million people. And then the tips start rolling in. One of which came from a woman in Virginia who thought that the bust looked like her neighbor. A neighbor whose name's Robert Clark, an accountant and church member. And then they go to Robert Clark's home where they confront his wife. Of course, she is clearly stunned. Not only does she find out her husband had a full name, a full life before her, but he also murdered his entire family. On June 1st, he's arrested at his office, where fingerprints confirm that he was John List. He of course denies this. On April 12, 1990, John List is finally charged with the murders of each of his family members. Convicted to 5 life terms. He would die in prison at age 82. But the craziest rumor is that in his mansion, there was a signed Tiffany original skylight, worth $100K.
This is very tragic. How does love get to this point? How do you make such beautiful family and then decide one day to set them all on fire? So this is Stanley Obi, a Nigerian nurse based in Australia, and this is his ex-girlfriend, Sarah Nudge, an Australian woman. It wasn't stated if they were ever married, but they had 3 beautiful children together in the course of their relationship. However, sometime last year it was said their relationship ended and they went their separate ways. Stanley moved on to a new girlfriend and even got a new house where he moved in with the girlfriend, and I think the kids came to stay with him from time to time. It's unclear if Sarah ever moved on with another man, but she basically became some sort of motivational speaker on her Instagram page, giving relationship advice and rules, which this particular post of hers was claimed to have played a role in what was about to happen next. On the early hours of Thursday morning, around 3 a.m., Stanley was at home. In his new house with his new girlfriend, they were sleeping on the bed. The kids were also in the house too, in another room, I presume. While they were sleeping around that 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., it was said that Sarah, the ex-girlfriend, broke into the house, went straight to Stanley's room and doused him and his girlfriend with petrol on the bed, and they threw a light, causing them to erupt in fire. She literally burnt this man. It's unclear what exactly played out in the house, but soon the house became engulfed in flames. Stanley's neighbors were quick to get to him. They dragged his burning body out of the house. His girlfriend, however, escaped, and the children were rescued. After the neighbors dragged Stanley out of the house, it was said that Stanley told them that there was someone else inside the house that they should go and rescue. When the neighbor tried to go back to rescue the other victim, he couldn't, because he obviously saw that the victim was beyond help. And that turned out to be Sarah. Sarah was said to have died in the fire that she started. Stanley was rushed to the hospital, but he knew he was going to die. According to what was said, he kept telling the person that brought him to the hospital, whether his friend or so, that he's not going to make it, that he knows he's not going to make it, that the burns were 90 degrees. So he was very certain that he was going to die, and he kept asking them to help him. It was, however, reported yesterday that Stanley eventually succumbed to his injuries and died. So at this point, Stanley and his ex-girlfriend are no longer alive. But thankfully, the kids are alive, and his current girlfriend is also alive. So why did she